So I just published my first podcast episode and I would have not been able to do it without Laurie. I have paid actually huge prices to do something like this and I never followed through because I didn't have Laurie or someone like her, mostly Laurie, believing in me and just giving me that next step. And it's all in her course. I mean, every step is there. Everything that you ever wanted to know about podcasting is there, even your mindset, what to say, what not to say, what to use, what microphone to use. I mean, she has everything in there. And if you are thinking like I was, that I have a huge story to share with people who are going through what I went through, in my life. And if I would have had someone helping me through a podcast or something like that, I think the outcome would have been different. But I am who I am because of the way I was, in my life. But if you're thinking whether it's, raising kids, being a military wife, being a single mom, being a married wife in this day and age where most people are getting divorced, I mean, you just never know what you're going to be able to tell somebody to help them where they're at. So definitely check out Laurie's course. It's amazing.
Hi, I'm Laurie Hardy, and I help business owners go from frustration to ease when it comes to podcasting. If you're looking to boost your credibility and grow your business but feel overwhelmed by the process, I've got you covered. With over 30 years of experience in top radio markets, I know how to make your voice heard. My 7-day Podcast Pro program helps you move from scattered and unsure to confidently launching and maintaining a podcast that connects with your audience, builds your legacy. It's done with ease and minimal time. Plus, I'll share insider tips to help you rank in the top 5%.
And I have to tell you, almost every single time they start talking about something that they hadn't even thought of for years, they're like, I don't even know why I'm telling you this. I've done it myself on my own show, like talking about I was like, I don't even know why I remembered that. It's like talking about it helps. It helps you connect the dots.
Alexis Arralynn is a survivor and creator who brings raw honesty and empathy to every conversation she hosts. As the voice behind When the Bough Breaks podcast, she explores the realities of family estrangement and the quiet resilience it takes to build your life and identity when the people who raised you become distant.
Has your life, your dreams been interrupted? Good news. It is possible to reinvent our lives. People are doing it every day, and some are brave enough to share the struggles, disappointments, and challenges. If you are looking for a new beginning, a do-over, or to rediscover your passion, maybe even find a new one, then grab a cup of coffee and let's talk. Interrupted, Act 2, Reinventing Your Legacy, with your host, Coach Laurie.
Alexis Arralynn is the host of When the Bough Breaks podcast, and that's how I found you. I listened to your podcast. Welcome.
Thank you. Well, thank you so much for having me.
I want to get into what brought you to do this podcast because the reason I found it was I was looking for something that was very relevant. But first tell us what you do and what you love about it.
Well, my name is Alexis Arralynn, and I host the When the Bough Breaks podcast. It is a podcast that focuses on family estrangement issues and dynamics. And our guests are most of them are normal people that share their stories of estrangement. Some are estranged parents, some are estranged adult children, some are estranged siblings. We all kind of get on the show together and talk about it. We share what's helped us cope, whether it's books or other shows, or at the time I launched this show, there were no other podcasts talking about estrangement, which is why I created this one. It's meant to be a resource. So if you're interested in learning more about the estrangement dynamics, you can check out When the Bough Breaks podcast. The website is wtbbpod.com.
Let's just get to it. I found you because I am finding that this is a really big issue. I'm actually estranged from a family member. It's not talked about. And I'm hearing more and more parents that are estranged from their children. Do you mind sharing what brought you to do this?
Absolutely. Well, it's funny that you ask. I experienced estrangement from my family. I had a very interesting upbringing. I was raised in, I won't say the name of it, but I was raised in a fundamental religious cult. I was married into it and stayed in it for a very long time until I was in my 30s. And that sort of kind of deconstruction that I did in leaving that faith also shed some light on a lot of problems that were in my family. And when I tried to place boundaries with them or even just talk about things that were bothering me, it was like they couldn't hear me. I just kind of reached a point where my children started being negatively affected by their behavior. And so we eventually went no contact, and which was very painful. It wasn't something I just did at the drop of a hat. I had thought about it for a long time. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. It was kind of something that was a last resort for me, that I felt would help keep me and my family safe. When I had done that, there weren't very many resources. Most of the perspective was from the parents' perspective, which I found to be somewhat helpful. But I also needed something that was kind of more tailored to me. But there wasn't really much out there. And so members of my support group that I was a part of, they were like, well, you have audio production experience, don't you? You know how to use a microphone, don't you? You know how to talk, don't you? Like, yeah, I know how to talk. So why don't you start a podcast about it? And I didn't think it would go anywhere. And it's been around the world several times. It's not something that's talked about, but it has existed for eons, for decades, hundreds and thousands of years, as long as relationships have been on the planet. There have been estrangement. It hasn't been talked about enough. So that's what I do. I talk about it.
Kudos to you for talking about it, because it is hard. And like you say, I don't think people realize this isn't just a fly off the handle moment. This is something like, for me, again, considering the children and all of the things, it was very difficult and painful.
Yes.
And then what I found is people wanted to have their input, even though I wasn't talking about it.
Yeah.
And that was difficult. I lived in a small town, and I'd be in the grocery store and somebody would voice their opinion loudly and not knowing, they don't know. And my goal isn't to hurt anyone. My goal is to just do what I need to, set boundaries for my family. That's why I was so glad when I found your podcast. Now, have you heard of the Preacher Boys podcast? No. He was in a fundamentalist Christian organization, and he walked away and he's interviewed so many people. And his purpose is to bring light, to shed light on what is happening in some of these, I'm putting in parentheses, Christian organizations that maybe really aren't. So it was later in life when you kind of realized something wasn't quite right.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to the dynamics of how I was raised. There was the religious element, which took up, we based our entire structure off of that. That in and of itself was very disruptive to my normal sort of like regulation. I didn't even feel safe sleeping at night. It was a very scary religion. It wasn't something that was comforting to me. It caused me a lot of pain, a lot of grief, and it was consistent. It didn't matter which church or which group we went to. It was just different canvassing, painting, essentially. Yeah, I came to a point when I was in my early 30s. I was a pastor at a church, a worship minister, a multimedia director, young adults pastor, did a lot of pastoring. I read the Bible more than I should have, I guess, because we did base our beliefs off the Bible, like you said, but there were some problems with that. I don't want to get too much into it. I talk more about my deconstruction stuff specifically on some other shows that I've guested on if you want to dig more deeper into that, because there's some good stuff. You really want to go down the rabbit hole of my deconstruction. There's some good stuff on my YouTube channel. But basically, the long and short story of it is that I studied more because I felt, there's something wrong with this. I need to figure out, what am I missing? I kept thinking that there's a problem with me. And the same sort of idea spread throughout the relationships with my family. What's wrong with me? Why am I constantly getting the same sort of reactive negative response from my family members? What am I doing wrong? Finally stepped out of this self-examination mode and started to just validate my own feelings first, that, this doesn't feel right. Okay. Like I didn't have all the answers to everything, but I started going to therapy and I was just like, this doesn't feel right. I didn't really realize that suppressed memories were a thing. I didn't realize that there really was an inner child in everybody. That's something I used to think that was cheesy and used to make fun of it. And no, there is. And if you go through a lot in your childhood, it's going to creep up on you as an adult if you have some things that you have not healed yet. And so that's kind of what was happening to me. And I think just being a mom triggered a lot of those things. When my parents started to display behavior that I witnessed as a child growing up that damaged me, that was when I said, okay, first of all, I can't do that anymore because that's what's wrong with it. I just knew in my gut it wasn't right. And I didn't have to read any more texts. I didn't have to listen to any more adults telling me that this was okay. I knew that it was wrong. And I knew because my kids were also confirming things to me. And that was really kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, was that my kids were confirming that they're not nice to us, Mom. They don't make us feel good. They make us feel ashamed and they do mean things on purpose and, horrible things that my kids would tell me. And I knew that they were telling me the truth because my parents had done the same thing.
Kudos to you also for recognizing that it wasn't you, because I think when we grow up in it,
not always you.
we think it's normal and there's something wrong with us. And my story is similar to yours. It was when I became a mom. And then I recognized some of those behaviors. Oh, no, those aren't normal.
Yeah.
Other people's parents don't do that. So one thing I didn't understand, this happened for me. I didn't necessarily walk away from the faith, but there were so many questions. What I'm hearing lately is this deconstruction. And I think a little bit of that is what I went through. Can you kind of explain what that is?
For me, I can remember a time where I didn't have the cult around. I didn't have the same people around. I didn't have that structure. I can remember when I was very little and was just sort of free to do and be and feel. And I wanted to get back to that place. And I think that was really where I needed to be. In deconstructing, I think is different it's a strong word. I think it's different for everybody. I think everyone has their own journey or how much they want to deconstruct, I think is also as a spectrum. We're all different people and the universe is so big. We don't know, and just to acknowledge that is a very big thing or a hard thing for some people. And so I think that, with my own unique deconstruction journey, I just think that I had to remove a lot of the parts that were damaging to me. And I had to dig for, actual fact and truth in certain things. And I had to really decide what made me feel good and what made me feel bad and why it made me feel bad. Not everything that makes you feel bad is bad for you. Sometimes it's telling you something. It's just a message. When you're feeling uncomfortable around someone, that's a message. I didn't know why for the longest time, but I used to have periods of nausea when my sister would come over. My sister's 14 years older than me. And let's just say she got away with a lot. And my nervous system did not like my sister. And it took me years to understand that. You have to really pay attention to your feelings. But I was raised in a way where you weren't allowed to feel. You weren't allowed to think about how you felt. You weren't allowed to, hey, say, I don't like this. Can we not? I don't feel comfortable. No, you have to do this or you are rebelling, which is the same as witchcraft. And it would just go straight to witchcraft. They would accuse you of witchcraft as a kid. So it's like, no, I'm not a witch. Like, and you're scratching your head as a kid, like, what just happened? And just, it was very confusing as a kid. And so when you start that as your foundation, that doesn't go so well when you're an adult. But I think just deconstructing for me was just getting back to a place where I felt comfortable in my own skin and knew what I knew to be true. And to stick with that and to be comfortable with that and to be secure with that, to know that I don't know everything and I don't have to know everything to be happy. Yeah. I don't have to know everything to be confident. I don't have to know everything to make meaning out of my life. It's a good place for me to be.
Is it okay with you if we talk a little bit about repressed memories?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay,
Sure.
so that's my story.
Okay.
And it was, now I'm a lot older than you, but when this began to happen, it was when I had kids and I started to remember things, because when you're a child and you have no one to go to, you have to suppress the memory. But Dr. Dobson came out with all this false repressed memory syndrome.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm like, it was such a terrible time for me. And there was no one to talk to. Man, if I would have had your podcast then, like, somebody else knows what this is, but there was no internet. There was just Dr. Dobson going, this is a big lie. And people, it's an enemy. It's the enemy doing this. It just made it so hard for me that I isolated even more, because who's going to believe me and who do I talk to? So
Yeah.
can you talk about your experience with that?
Yeah. Growing up and having no one to talk to. That is hell for a kid. And I might even cry talking about that, just going back to that feeling of being surrounded by people who claimed that they loved me and claimed that they cared about me, but they didn't want to listen. They didn't want to hear no. They didn't care if I cried. They laughed if I was upset. They relished in my pain, and that is hell for a kid. And so I began to have nightmares at night. So sleep became scary. Being awake was just as scary. Everything was so scary. And you can't handle that kind of fear as a kid all the time. When you're raised in like a doomsday sort of cult where everything is about the end of the world, and that is your motivation for every action of your daily life. When you're 7 years old and you're thinking about you could go any second, that is not healthy for a 7-year-old. So, and like you said, when you don't have an outlet, you start putting things away and filing that. We'll go through that later. I can't deal with this now. And even though you might have memories of certain things, the memory as a whole and the feelings don't really come up until, like you said, when you're older. For years, I didn't understand why I would always get sick at the smell of hairspray. I thought doctors were like, well, maybe you're chemically sensitive. I'm like, I'm chemically sensitive. I work around chemicals all day. I'm a cleaning professional. Like, don't give me that, but really, I realize now that it was just one of my abusers wore a lot of hairspray and used hairspray on me. And like, it wasn't a nice experience. And it used to make me ill. Now I'm fine because I understand why. But that was just a warning that my body was like, oh, this smells like so-and-so. There might be danger nearby. And so then my nervous system would I would start panicking and not know why. You don't really put those things together. It could take years, but talking about it helps. And so once I was finally in my 30s and had the safe space to talk about it, which I have to thank my eldest daughter for, because she went to counseling before any of us did for like a non-family related thing. And I wanted to go to counseling so I could like be a support to her. But then my counselor was like, well, I can, let's work on you. It's like, we got to work on you so you can, why is this so hard for you? And so we would talk about it. And then all this other stuff started coming up. I was like, and I couldn't deal with it. And so I didn't know how to help my daughter because I hadn't gone through the healing myself and some of the things she was dealing with. So I finally got into that safe space and got used to talking about it for the first time. There's a podcast episode of my own show that I'm going to release sometime in the future, but I do talk about this, where I was forced to be the keeper of a lot of family secrets, not just the abuse, not just our religion, not just the fact that we were homeschooled and a lot of people didn't like us just because of that. There were a lot of horrible family secrets that I was forced to keep and not talk about. And so I grew up with people thinking that I was super quiet. If you knew me now, nobody would ever guess that I was a quiet person, because I didn't feel safe. I didn't feel safe to even mention my preferences on things. And once I got in that safe space, and started talking about it, I started to heal myself and figure things out and understand where all these feelings were coming from, and why I was depressed around this time of year, and why I don't like the smell of this, and why, or why this certain person bugs me because they remind me of this other person. That's a warning. And then when I started podcasting about it, I was like, okay, well, let's create a safe space that's just for estrangement issues. I just took it a step further and created a very niche podcast. Like you said, there were no resources, not very many. So, and that's all I've really done. I'm not a special person. I want to heal myself. I want to get better. I want to feel better about myself. And I want to give my kids a life they're not afraid of. And that gives them nightmares. And I just try to create a safe space for myself and for other people to talk about those things that used to scare them, and things that they can do now to deconstruct from the abuse, whether there was religion in it or not. We all have the ability to heal parts of ourselves, and it's a journey. It's not really a destination. It's something that you work at every day.
Yeah. Now, do you find when people finally come on your podcast, sometimes they tell them their story for the first time, and do you see the change in them?
Oh, absolutely. And I have to tell you, almost every single time they start talking about something that they hadn't even thought of for years, they're like, I don't even know why I'm telling you this. I've done it myself on my own show, talking about myself. I don't even know why I remember that. It's like talking about it helps. It helps you connect the dots. And so, yeah, talk therapy, it does work. It can unlock some things you didn't think were there.
I know that when you talk about it and somebody nods like they get it, all of a sudden for me, I would just think, oh, I'm not alone. Because when I started to realize other families weren't like mine, then I thought,
back and laughter, that's another sign they get what you're saying, when they just start laughing, because that's where they are in their healing. It's just,
yeah. And it's so powerful to share your story, because that's the only way the healing begins. We have to open our mouth or write, or we have to get it out of our head. And then pretty soon people start saying, I know, me too. Or I know for me with my counselor, I would say something very matter of fact that probably should have had a ton of emotion attached to it. And she'd say, well, you know what that is. And I'm like, what it is? It's a thing? And she's like, yeah, it's an abuse thing that abusers do. And I'm like, what? There's a thing? So it began to open up my eyes to see, because I was just quiet because I might say something that would get me in big trouble.
Right.
So
especially when you're dealing with narcissistic abuse, that's a whole other level of abuse. It's very scary. They're very manipulative. They're very skillful, and they're a natural at it. It's one of the things that it's kind of impressive, the way that they can do that, just make you so confused and make you question yourself and thinking that it's you. And that was a whole other layer to the dynamic of my family, was that my mother and my sister both are malignant narcissists, both overt, covert, very scary people, but also very charming and very lovable and charismatic personalities. They're very talented people. My sister has a beautiful voice. She sings and she plays the piano. My mom is a bass player. And I've never heard her I've never heard her play a bad note. She's amazing. I can go on and on about how talented and how wonderful my mom and my sister are, but I can also write a book on the things that they did to just be mean for no reason, or to set me up for failure, or just to laugh in my face, or just to embarrass me for fun. These people, they walk the plank. You think they're like everybody else. And you can think that they're like everybody else until you're in your 30s and you go to therapy and you're like, oh gosh, I didn't even know about narcissism until that it was an actual thing. Like you said, it's an actual thing. I didn't learn about narcissistic personality disorder until I was going to counseling. And I was talking about my sister a lot in the previous weeks, and my counselor was, he was trying to be real gentle with me. His first time I was ever in counseling. So he gives me this pamphlet that explains what narcissistic personality disorder is. And I thought it was a joke. I thought I was on a hidden camera show and they had made all this stuff about my sister. I thought, how do you know my sister? How do you know? How do you know this? How do you know? I was like, is this a joke? I kept looking for cameras. I really did think it was a joke. I never knew about it. I was like, but this is exactly, but I was like, okay, but then now what? Okay, so my sister has this and it's not exactly her fault. It comes from somewhere else. And I hadn't really figured out my mom yet at that point. My mom was harder to figure out because she's more covert. She makes it look like she's not a part of anything, but she's really like the puppet master, behind the scenes. And she used my sister a lot because my sister's more impulsive and overt. So there was that whole dynamic. And it's kind of horrifying to find out that there are certain things about certain people that are never going to change. And then so you have to deal with the grief of, oh, this is who they are and this is who they're going to be. And it's probably not going to get better. And you have to figure out a way to love them as best you can. Sometimes that means staying away from them, because that otherwise there's going to be conflict and the cycle is going to continue. I get all of that. It's very horrifying to make that realization, I think, when you realize that someone that you loved was actually behind a lot of the pain and a lot of the suffering you experienced. And then you're back to, no, I really am alone. I really don't have anyone. I got this therapist. I got this podcast, and so you do what you can. And sometimes that being alone part is important though, because that's when we give ourselves time and space to learn what we like and what feels good and what doesn't feel good. And we learn what boundaries we need to set with other people. Because when you give yourself enough time and space in your own little bubble to heal, after a while, it's going to be easier to pick out the people who aren't good for you.
You know the saying, you know how to tell if someone's a narcissist? Give them a boundary.
Yes, actually. And the funny thing is that I always like to recommend this book and people think it's funny because I'm an atheist, and I recommend a Christian book by Henry Cloud and Townsend. It's a book called Boundaries. It's a very old book.
I've read it.
Yeah, you have. Isn't it great?
Yes.
It connects a lot of the dots and it helps show you that you don't have to do what everybody tells you to do. And you have feelings and you have a right to express them in a safe place. I was reading that book the first time I was going to counseling, and it really helped me. And so that was my main thing. I was like, but they're not respecting my boundaries. They're not listening. I'm giving them chance after chance. I'm being clear with them, and they just don't care. Finally, my counselor, he asked me this real important question that kind of stung a little bit. It was like more than a year I'd been in counseling trying to figure out what to do, try to make this better. For some reason, I felt it was my responsibility. The weight of all these family relationships, that was my responsibility. I don't know why, because you're in a narcissistic relationship and they constantly make everything your responsibility. Don't walk on eggshells. Don't bother them. Don't make them mad. Don't do anything to upset them. Don't tell them what they're doing wrong.
And everything's your fault, right?
Cry. Yep. Yeah. My counselor asked me, he said, well, how long are you going to let them treat you like that? And I had to realize, I'm in my 30s now. I'm not 7 years old anymore. I can walk away from this. I can leave the table whenever someone starts talking about inappropriate stuff. When my kids are at the table, I can get up and leave without saying a word if I want. I don't have to go to certain family functions. Time after time, I'd given them chances and kind of breaking no contact for the sake of a wedding or the sake of something else. And every single time they reminded me why that no contact was working for me. Every day it's a different, you're in the same place. What am I going to do today? Who am I going to allow in my life? How am I going to live my life today? What am I going to do today? What kind of an attitude do I want to have versus how I'm just feeling? Because that's important to get all those feelings out. But also sometimes we have to understand that we make our own happiness. We've got to stop relying on other people to do that for us. We've got to stop relying on all these people who make us promises and say nice things to us. We have to stop relying on them to make us happy. Happiness is something that you have to create for yourself, I think. I think people can contribute to it for sure. People who are kind, people who have your best interest, but you have to want that for yourself before you can recognize that, like, in other people. And I didn't recognize that for a long time when you grow up in that kind of dynamic.
And it is a process. Like, I remember realizing something was wrong and then trying to figure it out, then going to counseling and then setting the boundaries and then thinking, I'll set good boundaries and they'll change and we'll live happily ever after.
Yeah.
And like, dream on.
Yeah. Or they'll do the opposite and like lie to your face, and your kids will be like, we saw what happened. My kids, they told on my family so many times, because they're like me. They talk. They just in their genes, I guess. Yeah, it's a wild trip healing, because you're constantly testing boundaries every day. You're testing boundaries with yourself. You're testing boundaries with your coworkers. You're testing boundaries with your kids or with your neighbors. Something I had to learn is life isn't going to wait for me to catch up. So I have to, learn this stuff. I have to read more books. I have to listen to more things, because there's a lot of catching up that I have to do in just socializing with other people, because the people that I had socializing with growing up were not normal. And I didn't know that. So I had to get somewhere else. And I remember the first time I had, I think, a normal boyfriend. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, but there was no other shoe. I was getting anxious about that. I kept thinking, he's going to eventually yell at me, or he's going to eventually do something that's hurtful. Everybody in my life has.
Mm-hmm.
And he never did. Things didn't work out between us for a lot of reasons. A lot of them are just like logistical reasons, but I didn't know what it was like to be in a relationship with somebody who had my best interest, who cared about me, who wasn't always thinking about how they could take advantage of me. And I didn't know what that was like. And I kept waiting for something to happen. That relationship in and of itself was very healing for me, just to learn how to be in a space with a safe person. Mm-hmm. That was new for me. And learning how to be that safe person for myself, because I hadn't learned how to do that yet. While I was in that relationship, I didn't know how to be safe in my own self. I didn't know how to stick up for myself. There was still a lot of learning I had to do. I was homeschooled. I did not have the same kind of public education that, every other person had. So there was a lot of things I had to learn and unlearn and relearn, going out on my own without any family support or any friends, because all the friends that I had were in the group that I was in. I did a lot of work independently and on my own, but it was good.
As you have healed, okay, I since we're sharing, I have always, until just recently, always felt like I was going to be in trouble. Like anything that happened. And I've really now at 66 learned to let go of that. But even like an email from somebody important, I'm like, I'm in trouble. And I'm like, what? How does this still happen?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. You have that constant feeling of like walking guilt, shame, especially when you grew up in a narcissistic household. Your job is to take the blunt for everybody else's problems or mistakes. It was your fault somehow, whether directly or indirectly. And so, yeah, you could just be walking, talking, doing nothing wrong, but you could feel like, you feel like you're just offending people by being there. And I get that. And yeah, for a long time, I had this feeling of, that was one of the things I was working on when I was deconstructing, is this constant feeling of guilt and shame I had for no reason. Because I was like, even to my cult friends' standards, I was a prude. They made fun of me because of how well behaved I was. I got awards. I was the teacher's pet. I was the employee of the month twice in a row at this one place. I was like, stop this. You got to stop this. Other people are getting pissed off. Like, I was a very, very goody two shoes, constantly afraid of offending somebody or making someone else feel uncomfortable. was never thinking about me, and that made me uncomfortable. It made me feel bad all the time, constantly thinking about other people. I'm sorry, that's not like a good thing. That's unhealthy, and it makes you feel bad. Like, you don't have to do that. There are times when you can focus on other people. And that was something that I had to get used to because I grew up always thinking about them. So thinking about myself was a new thing. Getting my hair done, like, what? That's so extra. Like, or my nails, or buying a necklace, or anything was just extra. I didn't deserve any of that, and it's like, well, they're the ones who did this and this and this and this and this, and they did that too, and they made me keep a tight lip about it. Why have to walk around feeling guilty for putting up with it? That was where a whole new guilt came in. I was putting up with it. So I had to deal with that guilt too.
I love the question your counselor asked you, because I think for me, even though I began to recognize something was really off, it still was really hard for me to separate that it's not me. What do you do when all of a sudden you're not the problem? Like, then you're not perfect, but you're not the problem. You're not causing all the issues. Yeah. And that was hard for me to get my sea legs to figure out, how do I live like this, not being everybody's problem?
Yeah. Yeah. What, you start becoming other people's solutions? And I mean, that's what I feel like. That's where my podcast was born out of. I made a solution out of a problem. Perfect example. I mean, I don't want to toot my own horn, but I mean, that's what you got to do. That's what you got to do. And that's how I created my cleaning business. Because I mean, on top of what I grew up in, my house was not nice. I grew up in a hoarder home. Everything was there, anything and everything. We had to dig through stuff. I mean, it was just yucko. And I didn't like that. And so I was just like, why? We don't have to do this. And so I started cleaning, and my family didn't like it, didn't appreciate it, because they felt that was somehow above them. I think it was. And it made them uncomfortable. They used to make fun of me for it. If I would organize the kitchen cabinet, my dad would go in and just mismatch everything, just out of spite, just to be mean, but with a mean look on his face too, not even as a joke. I was just like, all right, well, let's just go somewhere else where I'm appreciated, where somebody actually needs me to come and help them with something. Now I have a job helping people who can't do it for themselves. And I don't do a lot of hoarding clean anymore, but most of my clients, they all appreciate me, and they all need me, and they all need me because they can't do it. And so they appreciate me. They're nicer than my own parents ever were to me when I come to their house, and they pay me money on top of that. So, I mean, I think I got a good thing going.
I love it. Well, Alexis, you are so full of joy. And I was just chatting with someone today. They said joy is the top of the emotional vibration. So it's joy, and then under that is gratitude. But at the very bottom is guilt and shame. And I was just thinking about how much of my life I lived in that guilt and shame. So now I'm trying to make up with it with joy, but that hasn't come easy. I could put it on. People would have never guessed, because I could put on, but that now I feel the joy in my life.
Yeah. And that just kind of brings me back to what I said before, is just going back to that place where I felt most complete and most joyful and most happy. I went to this art class. It was funny because I didn't know that it was like an art therapy healing class. I thought it was just a regular art class. And then it was just ended up being something I exactly needed, which was funny. So we had to draw a picture of a heart, and then we had to put inside of the heart everything that we loved and that made us happy. Sorry, I'm getting emotional because I think everybody should do this, because it's important to remember the things that made you happy, especially when you feel like you've lived several lifetimes in that phase of grief or self-blame or shame. You don't even know, you forget what happiness is. You forget where your joy is. You don't know where it is, it's buried. So yeah, you have to do some digging. I always go back to that place. Music makes me happy. Having a clean house makes me happy. It does. Star Trek makes me happy. Being with my kids makes me happy. Making other people happy makes me happy. And those are things that I keep my life simple, and I go after those things. I don't go after having to be a part of someone else's drama, or I don't have to sacrifice myself in order to please this person or impress this person or feel like this person's on my side. I don't need any of that. I don't need an entourage of people in order to feel special. I know what I've been through and I know what I've accomplished, whether or not anyone was around to witness it. And that's where the gratitude comes in. You got to have gratitude to yourself, for getting through all of that. And then giving yourself the permission to find that joy and to do those things again, even if it's coloring, if it's something, go back as early in your childhood as you can. What made you happy? Was it those lemon cookies that you had that your neighbor baked or something? Find those things and go after them.
That is such beautiful wisdom. And thank you for being so candid, because this is hard. And we try to find the humor. There's a lady I interviewed. She's a counselor, and she had married into a narcissistic relationship. And even his parents said, well, don't you think he's narcissistic? You're a counselor. And she's like, no. So she started researching it. So she goes to him. She goes, I think you're a narcissist. And he's like, no. And she goes, I don't think that was a good idea. But they call it gaslighting and that. And when I was growing up, there were no words for it. I felt crazy. And I remember just before I got to the point where I started to realize, I honestly thought maybe I was crazy, because I would say this and they'd say, oh, no, that didn't happen. Or always changing my reality.
Right. Or you weren't old enough to remember that, oh gosh, that for years. Yes. That is so damaging. And eventually you start to think that you're crazy. That's why I went to counseling. I was like, I think maybe I'm crazy.
Yes.
And they're like, actually, the crazy people don't come to counseling. You guys do.
I love that. Oh my gosh. This has been so great. So how do we find your podcast?
Well, you can find us pretty much wherever podcasts are located, or you can visit our website, which is wtbbpod.com. We're hosted through Buzzsprout. We've been hosted through Buzzsprout for a long time. And you can also take a visit on my YouTube channel, Alexis Arralynn. It has all of the podcast episodes and also some guest appearances that I've done on other shows where I dig deeper into the deconstruction stuff, or like what life in my cult was like, if you're interested in hearing more about that, and some other things too. So check it out. Alexis Arralynn on YouTube.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go stalk you a little more. But Alexis, it's been such a joy. And isn't it funny when we connect over
I know, it's great.
Trauma.
Healing. I mean, I got my cry. I'm good. Like we talked. Yeah. We validated each other. Like it really does help. It really does. You should try it sometime. You guys want to come on my show? Just check us out, or you can email the show, wtbbpodcast@gmail.com, and we'll get you scheduled.
Okay. Before we go, you have shared so much, so I don't know how this will hit you, but what is it you really, really want us to know?
That you matter. You don't have to be like anybody else, that you matter just the way that you are. Give yourself the time and space to figure it out, because I think you're going to like who you are once you get to know them. Give yourself permission to set those boundaries and heal. Again, when they don't want to respect the little boundary, that's just a hint that they don't belong in your life. If you can't teach someone how to love you, they don't belong in your class.
So powerful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
If you love this podcast, here's a big ask. Will you share with your friends and family, subscribe, give us a review, and a 5-star rating so that others looking to reinvent their lives will be able to get the help they're looking for? Thank you in advance.